welcome to another Australian Spinal Research Foundation members update video. We are very lucky today to be talking to one of the great thinkers in our profession. He probably blushed when he heard me say that, but we're here with Dr. Simon Senzon. He is doing some amazing work right now. You might know him from the institute that he has, but you're soon to know his name from a couple of books he's published. One covering the history of the vertebral subluxation in 10 papers, and the other one covering the green books, and it's really a definitive guide. So we are very lucky to be talking to him today. We're going to be talking about the vertebral subluxation and the journey that we've taken on that over the years. How are you, Dr. Simon?
I am doing great. Great to see you, Claire. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. And I was just thinking as he was telling me all that you've been up to, that if you want to get something done, you really have to ask a busy person, and you must be one heck of a busy person. So yeah, tell us about the books that you're about to release.
Sure. Well, I'm thinking of them as really two books published as one at once. The first one that we just released is the Palmer Chiropractic Green Books, the definitive guide.
Yeah.
And it's really incredible. It's a overview of all 44 volumes, really, of the Green Books, from D.D. Palmer, B.J. Palmer, and B.J.'s faculty and staff. It's just a philosophical, theoretical overview of all the books in a real historical perspective. So you're really getting a history of the early profession through the 1960s, as well as sort of the gems from all the Green Books, which most people haven't read them all. So it's a really wonderful way to really start looking at those books. There's a whole chapter on Ralph Stevenson's life and writings, and a whole chapter on his teacher, John Craven. And there's 150 pages on B.J. Palmer's life and works, and another 60 just on D.D. Palmer's ideas. It's just an incredible book. And then there's a whole section in the back for collectors, which was written by my co-authors. People who want to collect the old books and have them on their shelf. They figured out how to tell which ones are which. It's just a really amazing book.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, which is not really a book, but I'm thinking of it as a book because it's 100,000 words and it's 10 papers that it's taken me several years to get to this point. I just sent in the 10th paper yesterday for the final overview by the journal. They're being published in the Journal of Chiropractic Humanities, which is cited, and they're owned by National Chiropractic College, but they're also listed in PubMed, and they're available for free. So people will be able to access them. And it was really an evolving project. I originally wanted to document the history of ideas in chiropractic in such a way that we could correct the misperceptions in the literature. Because a lot of the things that you read today in the literature are just incorrect. There are organizations, there are journals in chiropractic that dismiss the vertebral subluxation either as a historical artifact, as a narrow concept that was only adhered to by a small group in the profession. And there are these sort of myths that get passed down, not just through people lecturing about them, but have actually been published in the peer-reviewed literature that are incorrect. And then those get cited and referenced, and then there becomes this whole sort of meme or this whole sort of like misunderstood ideas about the basis of chiropractic that people come to believe. They teach at the universities, the regulators start to embrace these ideas that are incorrect. So my intent was to set the record straight. And one of the early critiques I got from this peer review process was that I was originally writing about the history of the philosophers in chiropractic. And the reviewers said, well, you're missing all of our guys, right? The guys who started National Chiropractic College, the guys who led some of the other schools that were really more towards the biomedical spectrum of the profession. So I said, okay, if you guys really want the facts, I'll really lay it out, because I know for a fact that a lot of those original pioneers in chiropractic were all subluxation theorists and researchers. And most people don't know it. So I started writing and writing and writing, and the editor was very generous with me, and she's going to publish all 10 papers in one issue, which should come out in the next couple of weeks. And it's really a history of the chiropractic vertebral subluxation from 1897 to 1997.
Yeah, wow.
And
Gosh.
it's really, yeah, it's really comprehensive. The final paper, paper 10, has a special section of Peter Rome's work, who's an Australian that we love, who's done some wonderful literature work on the terminology of chiropractic. There's also a section in there on Graham Dobson, who's in New Zealand. He teaches at the New Zealand School. And there's an overview in there of some of the later ideas. But that 10th paper had about, I finished it yesterday, it had 252 references. So it's a comprehensive text when you look at it all together. So what it does is it looks at how the theories, the vertebral subluxation theories, developed over time, what schools were doing actual research on them, what schools were theorizing about them, and who was referencing whom, and how that sort of grew as a sort of intellectual field over time.
This is a big undertaking because there's so much overlap and so much cross-referencing and all that sort of stuff. Huge, and really congratulations on undertaking this body of work, because it's both necessary and really complicated. I'm interested in what the key learnings were through that for you. And also you mentioned correcting some misconceptions, and this, I think, is important work. So could you run me through some of that?
Sure. Well, I think some of the biggest learnings were that there was so much cross-pollination of ideas, especially in the 1960s and the 1970s. And a lot of the researchers back then were actually studying D.D. Palmer. There was a republication of D.D. Palmer's original book in 1966, when after B.J. Palmer died, his son published his grandfather's book, and they found the original copies and they republished it. So a lot of the leading intellectuals in the profession at that time were trying to update D.D. Palmer's theories with modern neurophysiology. So that was amazing for me to see. So then as the new theories developed into the 1970s and the 1980s, they were based on theories that really integrated D.D. Palmer's models. Also, theorists of that time were integrating Cellier's stress theory.
General
how the body goes into a stress response. So there was a famous book in 1962 by Homewood, and he was at the head of the Canadian school, and he said, Cellier figured out the physiology of stress. Chiropractors have figured out the neurology of stress, or the structure. So that became embedded within subluxation theory. So there was this amazing interconnections of ideas and thoughts. So the one thing I really got was that the subluxation theory grew in complexity over time. And it was never a static theory. So you'll read in the literature, especially the people who try to dismiss subluxation theory, we call them the subluxation deniers. They'll often say things like, oh, people who believe in subluxation, they usually use that word, right? Because they say there's no research, which is just not a fact. And they say that they believe in this old idea that D.D. Palmer invented back in 19 whatever, and it hasn't changed at all, or B.J. Palmer, and it hasn't changed at all. And that's just bunk, really. When anyone who knows the facts of how it developed knows that there was empirical research done at many universities and colleges, and the theory development grew over time. So when you put all that together, it creates this really textured, referenced, interesting history of ideas in chiropractic that is the real foundation for the modern profession. so one of my goals is to really help chiropractors to just know that, to be able to, when they read the literature and they read bunk like that in peer review, they could have something where they could write a letter to the editor and say, this is not correct. Let's set the record straight.
Yeah, and that is a beautiful thing, really. It's a gift to the profession to be able to have the work done by somebody like yourself to actually go and do the footwork and get the references and collect it all.
Well, the way I have framed it, and I published a paper a few years ago on chiropractic and systems science in McCoy's journal, Chiropractic Dialogues. And what I suggested there was that D.D. Palmer had several students around 1908 to 1910, and he had students who were homeopaths, medical doctors, osteopaths, and many of them brought their own ideas, their own perspectives to chiropractic. And then they wanted to take chiropractic and apply their own thoughts on healing to it. And the challenge for D.D. Palmer was they used his word, chiropractic, to define whatever it was they were doing. So I was able to really note that there were really three different streams from that period. There was what I call the chiropractic paradigm, which is D.D. Palmer's original ideas. And then there was the middle chiropractic paradigm, which was really pioneered by John Howard. He and his colleagues at National introduced physical therapy into chiropractic, naturopathy, probably some homeopathic concepts. So their model was that anything natural that supported the subluxation correction could be included as part of chiropractic.
Right.
So they all still focused on subluxation, but where D.D. Palmer said this is all you need to correct the vertebral subluxation, they said there's lots of other natural methods we can do to support before and after the subluxation correction happens.
Yeah.
And then there was another of his students that he actually started a school with, and he left the guy after 3 months because he was too medical, D.D. said. The guy was trying to teach medicine and call it chiropractic, this guy Gregory. And I call that the biomedical chiropractic paradigm. And their approach was to use chiropractic as an adjunct of biomedicine, just as kind of another thing in the armamentarium to fix diseases.
Yeah.
So, and they were kind of on a mission to make that happen.
Yeah.
So it started really early, these splits in the profession. And the bad part comes in when people misuse facts, or they make up stuff, or they cite stuff that someone else made up in order to support a position to say, get rid of vertebral subluxation. That's bad. So we can frame it and understand it as different perspectives, and then how people are applying their own stuff to it. Right.
So within that, and that's really interesting, the misuse of fact to support an argument against chiropractic or an argument against the vertebral subluxation. So what do you wish chiropractors knew about that?
Well, I'd like them to understand the literature, especially the chiropractic literature of the last 30 years, because that's really where it's happened. Starting around the late 1970s is when the real current peer-reviewed literature started to come on the scene. So there were papers that were published in the 80s and the 90s that are still being cited today that have incorrect assumptions, that have references that are missing. We know so much more today with digital technology, with scanning of old newspapers, with documents that have been found that nobody knew about back then, that we've been able to update what we know about what happened back then. And plus, we know we could look at all of it today. Back then, they didn't know what everything was happening. They didn't know all the books, all the articles. Yeah. Today, we have access to all of it. So we need to update that literature that had tons of errors instead of just reference it as if it's correct.
Yeah.
So part of what I'm doing now that I've got the papers and the book underway, I've started a PhD program at Southern Cross University, at the School of Health and Human Sciences in Melbourne.
Yeah. Amazing. Now, there was absolutely no way that we could get a full copy of Dr. Simon's brain down into this 15-minute interview. So I would encourage you all to keep a lookout for this work that's coming out. And thank you for the work that you do, Dr. Simon. It's important stuff. And as we press on with our mission to understand the vertebral subluxation, we look forward to seeing what comes from you.
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.